Hi, PerspectaWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Thursday, August 29th. A lot to talk about this morning with respect to Hurricane Dorian. It is still a Category 1 storm with maximum sustained winds at 85 miles per hour. It is moving on a northwesterly track right now. Looks like it will continue on a northwesterly track over the next day or two, then kind of shift to a westerly track that will push it towards the Florida Peninsula, and it very well could make landfall in Florida along the eastern coast of Florida in the Sunday-Monday time frame. It's not a 100% guarantee by any means. There are some signs that the ridge of high pressure over the western Atlantic that will build in over the next couple of days will actually begin to pull away by the end of the week and early part of next week. And from a historical point of view, there are some reasons to believe that this system could turn to the north just upon reaching near the Florida Peninsula. For that reason, all residents in the Carolinas and Georgia have to stay on guard, as well as all Floridians, of course, over the next few days. Here's the latest position of Hurricane Dorian as depicted by the Hurricane Center down in Miami. It is now over the southwestern part of the Atlantic. It moved from the northeastern Caribbean across the Virgin Islands, now out over the warm, open waters of the southwestern Atlantic. Again, moving on a northwesterly track. Then it'll become influenced by high pressure ridging building aloft over the western Atlantic, and will make a turn to the west in a couple of days, heading right for the east central part of Florida. Now, whether it starts to turn to the north, it's still in this fashion is still too early to say, or perhaps makes it all the way to the Florida Peninsula and then turns up the eastern seaboard. Those details, of course, have yet to be ironed out. Obviously, the number one place where preparation has to be made right now is Florida. But again, all residents in Georgia and the Carolinas have to stay on guard as well. Meanwhile, what remains of Tropical Storm Erin is pulling to the north and east, will produce some rainfall for Nova Scotia and get intertwined with a frontal system to produce some rainfall for northern New England as well. But of course, this is the big story right now. Hurricane Dorian now out over the open waters of the southwestern Atlantic. Well, here's the latest visible satellite image of Hurricane Dorian. A pretty healthy looking storm, not the biggest of hurricanes right now, but a rather symmetrical look to it. There is some dry air perhaps feeding in on the southeastern quadrant right now. Again, maybe gained a little bit in terms of winds in the last 12 hours or so. Again, now maximum sustained at 85 miles per hour. And again, moving on a northwesterly track right now, and that will continue for a while. And then it'll begin to be influenced by intensifying upper level ridging over the western Atlantic. And this area where it kind of makes that bend, it has often been where the rapid intensification takes place. In other words, it may maintain category status 1 or 2 up until this point, and then become a major hurricane when it starts to make that bend as it gets influenced by developing ridge aloft. That is a favorable development for intensification. Basically results in divergence in the upper part of the atmosphere, convergence in the lower part of the atmosphere. So oftentimes when the bend occurs, major intensification takes place as well. And on that point, here's the track and intensification level of Hurricane Andrew. And I'm not saying this will turn out to be a Hurricane Andrew, but this had a kind of a bend to it where it was moving northwest and then took a turn to the west. And this particular area right in here where that bend occurred, it intensified from a Category 1 shown in blue, then a Category 2, 3, 4, 5. It became a major hurricane, and again, a lot of intensification right at that bend region. And again, the reasoning for that, there's a physical reason for that. That's it goes under the influence of a building upper level ridge, turns it to the west as a flow develops clockwise around high pressure, and that could make that turn, and it could create some favorable conditions for intensification. So we'll watch for that with respect to Hurricane Dorian over the next few days. Now here's a compilation of numerical prediction forecast tracks here over the next few days. And again, most computer forecast models have it turning from a northwesterly direction to a westerly direction, again, as it becomes influenced by that upper level ridge, and then moving into the east central part of Florida. However, notice there are a few models here that do turn it to the north or northeast before reaching Florida. And that's why I say all residents in Georgia and South Carolina and all the way up to North Carolina have to pay particular attention to this system. Nothing is set in stone yet. It's not a guarantee, certainly not a 100% guarantee that it makes it all the way to Florida. Again, most models do have it going into the east central part of Florida, and at that point it could turn north up the eastern seaboard next week. So that's something else we'll watch out for, that all residents along the eastern seaboard have to be paying particular attention to this system as well. Well, I showed this kind of an ugly looking map yesterday, but it's a historical map of all the storm tracks given the position of where Hurricane Dorian is right now, which is right about in this region right here. And again, many of these systems did not make it all the way west to Florida. Certainly a large portion of these particular tropical systems that went through this particular location a curve to the northeast before ever making it, excuse me, before ever making it to Florida. So that scenario is certainly on the table and cannot be discounted. There were certainly storms that did make it all the way into Florida. In fact, some even made it into the Gulf of Mexico. But again, this is just something to pay attention to. It cannot be completely ruled out that there's a turn to the north just before reaching the Florida Peninsula, and we'll monitor that possibility over the next few days. Well, let's now go through the very important upper air forecast maps from last night's ensemble run of the GFS. We're looking at 500 millibar height anomalies, and this is beginning with Thursday morning time period right now. First of all, there's a deep upper level trough over south central Canada, less humid air, refreshing air mass moving into the northeast part of the country. Again, a very nice weather pattern for the mid-Atlantic and northeast U.S. But let's take a look down in this particular part of the Atlantic Ocean, and we'll move forward here. Not much in terms of ridging at this particular time, but ridging on this particular type of map is shown in orange. And look at this starting to build in and intensify in this particular region by late Friday night, and here we go by Saturday morning. Here's a reflection of Hurricane Dorian as of Saturday morning according to this ensemble run of the GFS forecast map. And in this particular position, you have a westerly flow of air, basically a clockwise flow of air around high pressure to the north. And we've talked many times about the importance of high pressure to the north this time of the year, and oftentimes a tropical system will slide in underneath from the east to the west with that westerly flow of air on the south side of that high pressure ridge. Basically, you can look at it like high pressure up in this region right now. But let's take a look at what happens here beyond this point. And here we go, we're moving forward, and here we are now Saturday afternoon into Saturday evening. Still some high pressure ridge shown here in orange by Sunday, but notice it tends to pull away here the last minute, like late Sunday into Sunday night. And here's the hurricane at that particular time, closing in on Florida. With this pulling away, it certainly does not rule out the possibility that there could be a slowdown of Hurricane Dorian Sunday time frame as it approaches the east coast of Florida, maybe even a turn to the northwest at this particular time. Again, it could make it all the way into Florida and then turn up the Atlantic seaboard. Let's move forward here, and the GEFS actually does push it into Florida, and then ultimately it can turn up the eastern seaboard at that time and produce some heavy rain all the way along the eastern seaboard. So still a lot of questions that remain. Florida, get prepared. As a potential major hurricane will be closing in on Florida during the latter part of the weekend. The most likely time period of major impact will be Sunday, Monday time period. But all those residents in Georgia and the Carolinas have to stay on guard as well for a possible last minute turn to the northwest or north up the Atlantic seaboard, especially the southeastern part of the East Coast. That's it for now. Stay tuned for updates later today and tomorrow here at PerspectaWeather.com. I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.